Subhash Chandra Garg, former finance secretary, you've been rather critical, or at least you've been suggesting that there is no need for celebration because you, and I quote a tweet that you have put out, where you've suggested that while we've grown 13.5% year on year, when you actually look at our 3-year growth, you're pointing that it's only 3.3%. Do we need serious introspection is what you argue, but there will be those who will counter and say, look, we had from 2020 2 years of COVID, and then we've had the Ukraine conflict. So given that, should we not see these numbers in a more positive light, Mr. Garg, or do you believe that the worst is not over?
See, we can always look at things positively, and we should look at it. That shouldn't be a problem. And the fact that we have come out of the pre-COVID level now, and we are 4%, 4.5% over the pre-COVID level, right? So that is fine, but I think what we should be really worried is that are we growing or we are not growing? And in that, the GDP growth in 3 years is only 3.3%. You take either.
No, but those are 3 years, I repeat, where we had 2 years of a pandemic and 1 year of the Ukraine war.
See, pandemic year, in the second wave, we did not sort of put lockdown, and therefore last year we grew in the Q1 by 20%. This year we are growing at 13.5%. It was the decision to lock down in the Q1 of 2021, which actually created the whole of the problem. That was not COVID. That was the decision taken to lock down. In the other quarters, we did not lock down, and therefore we did not go down that deep into sort of negative growth. What we need to see actually seriously, Rajdeep, is that for last 3 years in the second half, which is not COVID affected that way,
right,
we have been growing only at 4% consistently in last 3 years. The second half is only 4%.
You know, you're making a very important point. You're saying the second half of the year, over the last couple of years, which were not technically affected by COVID-induced lockdowns, growth has been at 4%. But, you know, again, we need to also look at the global picture. But Siddharth, Zarabi, you've heard two views in a way. Do you believe that the truth lies somewhere in between? We are still recovering from a low base. So some of these numbers can be deceptive at times. And therefore, we need to be a little cautious before we celebrate, given the fact, as Mr. Garg is pointing out, and Mr. Sanyal to some extent, that the next few quarters may not be as buoyant as what we saw, because this is in comparison to last year, which was the COVID-2 quarter of 2021.
Rajdeep, the current spate of economic growth could be described as the mid-phase of a marathon, where the runner had run out of steam. He caught up with some water and is now sprinting to catch up. And this catch-up is very significant regardless of the base effect as well as seasonal factors and extraordinary events like the Ukraine war that you alluded to. We are the fastest growing economy, and in the rest of the year, despite the sharp deceleration that we will witness, we will still be the fastest growing economy in the G20 nations. So those are the macro numbers. But if you look inside the numbers, the most important part I would like to submit here today is the robust performance of the services sector, because that is directly linked with organized as well as very large amount of unorganized workforce, which is services, trade, transport, hotels, and the telecommunication impetus that will come in. And therefore, I believe that we should for a moment pause and not do a quarter-on-quarter yearly comparison with extraordinary times. We are now in a spate where if the government continues to spend, and if private sector investment, which is the other big rosy bit of data in these numbers that I have noticed, if that continues, we are looking at a much better performance in the second half of the year and lower inflation, which is the best headline that we could talk about at this point of time.
And manufacturing, Siddharth, which remains tepid at the moment. You know, the expectation is that over time that will also pick up.
There was a lot of unmet demand that was met post the lockdown. It was but natural that such levels of demand could not have been sustained. And if I may add, in the current monsoon season, we have not seen equal regular rainfall. That has had its own impacts. We will see some impact on the rice paddy output this year. That is affecting consumer demand, and consumer demand is directly linked to manufacturing. Yet we can see in terms of new order activity, there has not been a major decline. And the government press release makes this very important point that you will see some revisions. They could be downwards or upwards. I argue that in certain sectors there will be upward revisions when these numbers are restated down the line in a few months from now.